as an experienced printmaker, can learn unbelievable amounts from beginning printmakers. Like, that empowers people.
Hello, print friends, and welcome. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. Each week, I chat with artists who use print-based media to do something beyond the expected. This is a bilingual podcast, so if you subscribe to us, you'll be getting episodes in English with me, as well as in Spanish with Ronaldo Gil Zambrano. Together, we speak to printmakers around the globe about their practice and passions in the world of printmaking. Hello, Print Friend is brought to you by Speedball Art Products, who've been offering a diverse range of high-quality products to your creative practice since 1997. But we all know that those products do not use themselves, which is why Speedball works with a fantastic lineup of contemporary printmakers who make up the Speedball team of demo artists. Artists like Zach Smith, an artist printmaker originally from Utah. And just like his online persona, a human boy, he is in fact a human boy. He was also the recipient of a print fellowship at the Charles Adams Studio Project in Lubbock, Texas, where he was responsible for planning and running community print workshops in the processes of screen print, relief, and letterpress. Some of the more heavily featured animals in his practice are prairie dogs, horses, salmon, and his most recent obsession, slugs. So if you want to learn a few tricks of the trade and expand and improve your practice, head on over to Speedball's YouTube channel and see how it's done with Zach Smith. There's a link in the show notes. My guest this week is Robynn Smith, the founder of Print Day in May, an international event in celebration of printmaking in all its forms, from lithographs to penguin footprints. We talk about its evolution over the last 15 years, its surprising early connections to the Kentucky Derby, and some of the most rewarding things about taking on a global project such as this. We'll also talk about the ways in which you, as printmakers, can participate and perhaps even win prizes from her sponsors. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to go off to the races with Robynn Smith. Hi, Robynn. How's it going?
Good, Miranda. How are you?
I'm really good. I'm really excited to talk with you and about your project, Print Day in May. It's been on my radar for a few years now, even as I've been kind of living and traveling outside of the United States. But as we'll get into, that's because it is very much an international event. And I'm just really keen to sit down and hear its story. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. And it's just wonderful when I find out that Print Day in May is known by someone that I haven't told about it. Really happy.
I have that same feeling about the podcast as well. You know, when I meet someone who's known and listens, and I'm just like, wow, and you're not my mom, you know?
Exactly. Yes.
It's a good feeling. Mm-hmm. Well, great. Well, before we get into that whole story, would you mind introducing yourself and letting people know who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Robynn Smith, and I live right outside of Santa Cruz, California. I am recently retired from Monterey Peninsula College, where I ran the two-dimensional fine arts program for 30 years. And I'm a painter and printmaker, both. I began my art career as a painter and sculptor, and eventually got involved in printmaking in the 80s, and have, obviously gotten hooked and continued my whole life. I'm also a very avid horseback rider. If anybody's interested, we can talk horses. And that's pretty much me. I have a studio called Blue Mouse Studios in Aptos, California, and I teach workshops out of Blue Mouse. And before the pandemic, I did a lot of international travel, bringing groups of artists and printmakers, sometimes specifically, to other countries to do workshops and touring. But wow. We'll see if that continues. Yeah.
I would, I feel like, we might have to keep chatting about that, off air, because that's something that has always been really intriguing to me, and something that I've always thought would be a wonderful thing to organize, because I've, lived abroad and traveled a lot through printmaking, and just have found the generosity of printmakers around the world to be staggering, just like.
That is very true. That is very true. And in grad school, I was actually in sculpture. So I was a ceramic sculptor. And that's when I found that community was in, sitting around waiting for the kiln to, fire off in the middle of the night and, baking pizza on top of the kiln. Because, painters are solitary, and I had been a painter. And then when I got involved in clay, that's when I found that community, and then found that, wow, it's also in printmaking. And a lot of it is because the equipment is, it's so equipment heavy. Not everybody has equipment, so you have to share. And so sharing is a big part of it. And what I found by doing international travel with printmakers is that you don't have to speak the same language, because the language is art and printmaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very exciting to keep that community going across the world, which is what Print Day in May is all about.
Absolutely. I think that's maybe part of the reason why I connected to the idea of it so much when I heard about it, is because I have been fortunate enough to also live that, and, know that if you show up somewhere and walk into a studio, you'll have family there. It's just,
absolutely,
it's amazing.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely miraculous. And to know that literally, if you only have two actual verbal words in common, your entire body still speaks the same language as the other person.
I love that. It just makes for an extraordinary international community, and really has that power, at least for me, to continually reinforce the goodness of other humans. And that's such a powerful experience, as we say, particularly in this day and age.
Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. So I think maybe the best place to start would just be like, what is Print Day in May? What's like, if you run into someone, in the checkout line at Trader Joe's, and they were to ask you, what would you say?
Right. And you've got like 2 seconds to answer. Yes. Print Day in May is an annual global event. It is fully participatory by anyone in the world, and there is no charge for it. People can participate in a myriad of ways. Basically, the idea is that for a 24-hour period, people all across the globe make prints, and they can blog about it on our blog. They can put it on their social media. They can put it on our social media, or they can just do it themselves and not tell anyone about it. But the idea is that printmakers all over the world for 24 hours are making prints. They're doing something they love. And I always feel like if you approach the world with love, that's a really powerful thing that we are putting out into the world. And so the idea that tens of thousands of people are doing what they love at the same time, it just makes me feel like we're contributing to the world.
Yeah. I think it would be very, very easy for me to just totally lean into my hippie woo-woo nature and talk about like what you're releasing into the world. But I not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but I think that the collective subconscious is something that is real and that has been, studied. And so that idea that you can put intention into the atmosphere and see effects from it is a beautiful, interesting thing. And I think that, as you say, people doing what they love, and of course people do love printmaking so much. Like you can feel that from people. It's and that's what, of course, connects people across language and cultural barriers. That's all there for sure. Yeah,
it is. And I am really not very woo-woo, although I do live in Santa Cruz, so I clearly appreciate that. I'm really quite a practical gal. However, I really feel that taking the time to indulge in one's passion that doesn't hurt anybody is something that is infectious. And so all these people taking a break and thinking about it and planning and being with others and checking in and saying, what are you going to do that day? And what are you doing today? And how did it go? It's like this wave of positivity that comes through art. And there can't really be anything better than that.
Yeah. I know it's described as, kind of watching the ball drop at New Year's Eve, because of course it is global. Yes. And so can you kind of just describe, what does a print day in May look like, as the sun rises on printing beds across the world?
Well, it's kind of amazing. I mean, this did not start as this kind of event. It grew, and we can talk about that. But what it is now for me and for the Print Day in May team each year is that we're in California. So we're sort of in the middle of the time zones, I guess. So we wake up in the morning and go to our computers or our phones, and Australia has already printed. So there are posts everywhere, Australia, New Zealand, all that area has already printed. And so we see posts about print parties and about the solitary printmaker who didn't have much time yesterday, so she went down to the ocean and made footprints in the sand. And we see pictures of the footprints. And then each hour as we go, we get more and more posts from various parts of the world. And then now it's California time and we're getting in the studio. And so some people are watching us work when they've already worked, and some people are just waking up. Hawaii is just waking up, and then they're printing long after we've been printing. So it is a lot like New Year's Eve, but, without the craziness and the alcohol.
Yeah.
Although, we do encourage anything that makes you print well and happily is fine. And there are, often, in the United States, we do it on the first Saturday in May every year. And that's just so that everybody knows that whatever their first Saturday is Print Day in May. It's not a definitive date. It is every year, but they know. So it's modeled on the Kentucky Derby, which is the first Saturday in May every year. So in the very beginning, when it was a very local situation, it involved watching the Derby and drinking mint juleps or whatever, also to celebrate the Derby. It is way morphed beyond that, but people do have print parties all over the world and plan things a year in advance for the following year. And then there are people who just say, I'm in my studio and I've been wanting to do this edition and I'm taking the day to do it. Or I've invited my next door neighbors over to see what I do all the time. And the kids are making potato prints, whatever it is. Good.
That's so interesting because I feel like that circles back a little bit to the horse side of your passions as well, and that's like okay, I see how it's all coming together. But it reminds me, we talked to Des McMahon from Limerick Printmakers maybe last year. I think it was like episode 95, and they do a 24-hour print marathon. Is part of what they do. And they definitely specifically say that they need the libations to keep up for the 24 hours. So indulging and printing,
goes hand in hand.
It does. It can. Yeah, it definitely can.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how, it started kind of with this connection to the Kentucky Derby. And so, of course, that's why it was the first Saturday in May. But what was kind of your motivation in that journey to say, I'm going to start something? And then how did you go about doing that?
Well, it really started so innocently, and we had no idea that this was going to happen. But I was teaching printmaking, among other things, at Monterey Peninsula College in Monterey, California. And we had an amazing program that just kept growing. One of the amazing things about community college is that you end up connecting and working with adults, people, not just college age students, but a lot of students who come back to school for one reason or another. Right, and because we had great equipment and good teachers, and it was a really ripe community, very quickly I began working with a lot of women my age who got hooked on printmaking. And so together we kind of grew as artists and printmakers. And so at one point, in 2007, a lot of my students had started getting their own presses, and they were ancillarily coming to class, but really working on their own a lot. And so I was kind of like, I want to corral you guys. I don't want you all dispersing. Mm-hmm. So we were having a weekend of printing together, which I could do because I could just open the facilities and have people. We had a print club that I founded, and that allowed us to use the school facilities. So we were all having a print day on one Saturday, and there were about, a dozen of us, maybe a few more. And we just started talking, and I said, we should all do this in our own studios, invite some others, and then we can just call each other on the phone. I mean, this was 2007.
Right.
So it's like there was no Instagram. And it was like, we'll just call up and say, hey, what are you doing? And maybe we can send some pictures to each other. So we thought, well, what day should we do it? We should do it, basically we decided May because it rhymed. Print day in May. It was a good rhyme.
Yeah.
And then we said, well, a Saturday or a Sunday. And I said, well, let's do it on Derby Day. It'll be great. So that's how it started. And then we did it again the following year. We had a good time. And then we did it again the following year. And our print community at school had been getting larger because at that time, the school was supportive of bringing in outside printmakers for workshops and things like that. We were growing the program. So everybody who came in to do a workshop or teach a lecture, or if we did a field trip somewhere, we invited them to join us on Print Day in May. And so that's how it started growing outside of Monterey and Santa Cruz. And then it just kept mushrooming. And then a student would say, hey, I could start a website. Okay, great. Do a website, and so it just grew and grew and grew. And then as my international practice grew, we got more people. So if I went to Iceland and worked with the printmakers in Reykjavik, then they would do it the following year. And if I went to Australia and worked with printmakers in Adelaide or in Queenstown, Tasmania, then the following year they were doing it. And then they were telling their friends. And so that's how it mushroomed. And it has continued, and I've been, at one point, my goal was I want to get printmakers from all 50 U.S. states. Okay, that took 2 years, and then that happened. And then how many countries can we get? And can we do all 7 continents? And the year that we got someone who sent us penguin footprints from Antarctica was like, oh my God, it's on 7 continents. Like, we are truly international. We really would like to get the guys on the space station to do it, but we've tried and they're very busy up there.
Yes, but
yeah.
Oh man,
I know. It's a great goal.
That's a great one.
But yeah, if anybody out there has access to that or wants to make a project out of getting those the astronauts on board, please do it. I just don't have the time and bandwidth right now, but boy, would that be great.
Oh, that would be so cool.
Yeah, so that's how the whole thing happened. And then eventually, I have to say, I would go to all the printmaking conferences, the Southern Graphics Council conference and things like that, and got hooked up with a woman named Christina Pumo, who was quite a bit younger than I am and worked at the time for Akua Color and Speedball. And she came up with the hashtag idea of, because I was like, this is getting too big. I need sponsors. I need somebody to help me with this because the demand is bigger than what I can do. And so she had this idea that if people hashtagged Akua and Speedball on social media, then they could win prizes. They could basically be selected and get products from Akua and Speedball. And I was like, well, let's try that. So we did that one year and that was huge. And so then it was like, well, we've got a sponsorship model. So we started soliciting sponsors. And it's a great win-win because all we do is provide, let people know that if they hashtag these sponsors, then they might be able to get product. Mm-hmm. And so that really increased our reach exponentially because the sponsors then used their mailing lists to let people know about Print Day in May. So it was a really good synergetic relationship. And then I got hooked up with Cranfield Colors in Wales. And that happened through one of the print conferences. I met Michael Crane, who is the owner manager of Cranfield. And we got along really well. And I happened to be going to Somerset in England that summer to do a print workshop. And he happens to live in Bath and his workshop, his factory is there. And so he then sent ink to the place that I was working in Somerset for them to use. I got hooked on that ink. It's so spectacular. It became my favorite working tool. I went to visit the factory. By the following year, they were sponsoring Print Day in May big time. They actually gave me a social media person. They gave me all kinds of wonderful access to Europe that I hadn't had before. So that was a fabulous relationship. Plus, they were sponsoring me to do workshops with their ink because I loved their Caligo Safe Wash ink. And so I became like an athlete wearing their shoes. And that was spectacular. And that was supposed to be what I was going to do in my retirement from Monterey Peninsula College. But then the pandemic hit, and that part of it is, I'm not going to say over, but it has been suspended.
Yeah.
But Cranfield is a huge part of what we do now on the day. They're wonderful supporters, as is Speedball, as is McLean's Printmaking in Oregon. And we've also expanded that reach of sponsorship to include organizations like ZMA's Printmaking in Massachusetts. And so if you hashtag ZMA's, then what you would get from them is workshop admissions and podcasts and videos and things like that. So we had Anderson Ranch do it one year. So it's really terrific. And now I have California Society of Printmakers, of which I'm on the board. They have helped a lot by suggesting team members for me. So this year, 4 out of 5 of us are California Society of Printmaker members, and CSP is offering some prizes to the general public through our hashtag campaign. And so it just keeps growing. So that's how it's worked. And like I said, it's a complete thrill when, somebody contacts me cold or I say something about PDIM and they're like, oh, I participated in that last year and I live in Mongolia. It's like,
oh, that's so cool. So in terms of, how people actually do participate, is that primarily through the hashtag? So let's say I'm a printmaker and I just got all fired up listening to you because how could I not? And all of this idea of these great sponsors, this idea of prizes. What's going to be my next step? Be like, I'm sold, Robynn. Sign me up. What do I do?
Okay. So in my perfect world, what you do is you go to www.printdayinmay.com, where one of our phenomenal team members, Carrie Gilbert from Oregon, has really worked on our website beautifully this year, along with Roseanne. And you see everything in front of you. You can register for the event at no charge. And registration allows you access to our blog. So you can become an author and blog to your heart's content, knowing that people from Print Day in May will be looking at your writing or at pictures that you're posting. It also gives you a newsletter, about 4 or 5 newsletters a year whenever I can pull it together. And it also gives you access. It gives all the people on the website access to each other, because we are launching a new participants list that can be searched by country, by name, or by method, by printmaking methods. So let's say you're going to be in India. And you say, I'm going to look at people who do etching in India and find myself, like people that I can go visit. So that is all open to you as a registrant. However, you do not even have to do that. You can say, oh my goodness, I am sick of things in my inbox. I just want to print and know that, 40,000 other printmakers are printing at the same time on that day. You just print, but you participated. And then there's anything in between. You can look at Instagram posts or Facebook posts or YouTube videos and never let us know you're out there. Or you can. And the other thing you can do is to participate in this hashtag campaign, which puts you in a position to be looked at by our sponsors and chosen for prizes. So there are tons of levels of this that you can participate in.
That sounds very fun. Do you have any, particulars about these prizes that you want to kind of plug? I know you mentioned some of the sponsors, and I'm sure, there's still some things in motion, but, obviously like products, like what could people kind of expect or hope to be contacted about if they are, looking to get some attention from their work? Yeah.
Well, I have just gone to our sponsor page on printdayinmay.com. And I can tell you that the California Society of Printmakers is giving away some amazing proprietary fluorescent color inks, litho inks, that they've gotten from another source in, I believe, New England. Cranfield always gives good prizes. They are, we don't have the specifics yet, but they are a wonderful sort of mid-size business out of the UK, and they make the fabulous Caligo Safe Wash inks, which are water washable inks made of linseed oil that do literally everything that traditional ink does as well, except for lithography, because that oil and water don't mix thing. But everything else, I have completely switched to that ink, and I had all my students, and when I was at school, the last 3 years were using that ink. All my Blue Mouse people use that ink. It's spectacular ink. They also make traditional litho ink and relief and etching ink, and they also make paint. So they are usually quite generous with us, and I'm sure they will be again this year, giving a number of prizes. Speedball, of course, the giant Speedball, they're wonderful. They began as our first sponsor, and they have hashtags listed that give away specifically Arnhem paper or Akua color inks or Speedball products. We have Pegasus Art in the UK, and they are doing a €50 gift voucher to use anything. You can buy anything from them. They are a big supplier. McLean's Printmaking in Oregon, they specialize in relief printing. They are offering a $75 gift certificate. ZMA's Printmaking, which is a premier green printmaking studio, run by Liz Chalfin in Massachusetts, and Liz has been instrumental in promoting green printmaking all over the world. She is quite a force, and she's just a wonderful person, and she founded this terrific studio. So free access to 2 of their video tutorials on their printmaking online school. Not certain yet what Neil Wallace Printmaking will be doing. And they are in Melbourne, Australia. Melbourne Etching Supplies will be doing something and giving some prizes. And SD, Art and Craft Products in the UK, the Japanese Paper Place, which is amazing. They are out of Canada, and they always give paper, $300 worth of heritage washi.
Nice.
This year. Center for Contemporary Printmaking in Connecticut usually gives a workshop admission. Artisan Media in the UK, they give video tutorials. And then Pookie Presses has these very beautiful, as they call it, dashingly assembled and eye-catching presses. And they're in the UK. They offered prizes last year too. So I expect we'll have all of these. I know we will have these particular sponsors. Not exactly sure what all of them are going to give us. But we always get sponsors at the last minute as well. People start contacting us saying, how do I be a sponsor? So if any of you out there want to be a sponsor, let us know. Because we're happy to have this sponsorship. We're honored by it. And it helps sponsors. It helps printmakers. It helps us. So it's a win-win everywhere.
I love that. Yeah, because this is taking place, of course, in the digital sphere. You don't need to worry about those elements that are often barriers. So it's just like it truly can be who is out there who loves printmaking and wants to be a part of this. And then, the supporters of that as well. That's an amazing list of sponsors. Speedball and McLean's helps keep the lights on in our podcast. So we absolutely appreciate them very much. It's amazing that the community, really can have no borders beyond internet access, is so beautiful. So
it is. It's really beautiful. And, I love that as we are, as they say, opening up, and things are getting back to normal in quotes, things will begin to look possibly a little bit more like they did 3 years ago. And that's terrific. But it also, as you're talking about the digital world, there was something so incredible about Print Day in May 2020 that I'm actually nostalgic for. In that we didn't know what to do. I mean, it was March and Print Day in May was in May. And, it's in the face of all the fear and everything else that was going on, PDIM seemed like, well, that's the last thing we're going to think about. But we continued to think about it. And Cranfield was a big part of it that year. And we kept moving forward. And what we found was that the connection that happened through Print Day in May was so moving.
Yeah.
Because so many people were not able to open their studios and have, print parties on the streets of Rio like they had before. But it gave people a reason to get back in their studios after the first few months of paralysis. And the comments that we got, the moving posts that we received were incredible. And the connection to our sponsors was deeper that year because of, being able to be touched by each other digitally. And, we haven't forgotten about the things that are important to us. And thank you, Print Day in May, for reminding me of what I love to do and reminding me that there's joy and reminding me that there's connection. So, I am so grateful that, to all that participated that year. It was really something. And then last year, that kind of continued. Yeah. And so this year, we'll see if it's, we'll see how it goes. I mean, we'll see how it goes every day right now, right? I'm supposed to go to a reception for a show that I'm in today. It'll be the first reception that I attend. I'll be masked, but I think I'll go tonight. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Wow. That's really, really moving what you describe from Print Day in May 2020. And I just can completely imagine people finding that ability to make that human connection and even that little touch of normalcy. Those were so important and still are.
Yes.
And so that's really wonderful. And it reflects almost a little bit the experience I had with the podcast, and that, I was just, started in 2018, just, plugging along, talking to print people and releasing episodes. And then all of a sudden we were isolating, we were separated, we were in fear. And I would get messages from people just saying like, I don't feel alone when I can listen to you talking to another printmaker.
Yes.
And it would just give me tears like every time, truly, because it's, as I think, identify with what you're saying about, it just kind of was something that I just wanted to see in the world, and it just kind of grew naturally. And, and I never had this ambition that it would play a role in a global human tragedy that meant something to someone. You don't think that when you start it.
No, you don't, but it's so true. And it's interesting, what the pandemic has done for podcasts and for radio. My husband's a radio guy. He's on a lot of different radio stations, and his work was considered essential work.
Yeah.
So he never stopped going to the radio station through the pandemic. And he has a number of different kinds of podcasts. You can look at From the Bookshelf is one of his, where he interviews authors.
Oh, cool.
And he's been doing From the Bookshelf for a decade. And now it is so much bigger than it ever was because people need connection to the human voice through the pandemic. And it kept everybody so connected. And it's given radio really a renaissance. So it's really interesting how that happened and how it's happening right now. We do not need to do this on video. We're doing this. It's our voices that are so important. It's like the voice is human touch. So it's really profound.
Yeah.
Another thing we did last year that I want to mention that I'd like to revisit at some point, but Print Day in May has always been virtual. And in November 2019, I was on a residency in Paris, and I got connected with a gallery that wanted to do a Print Day in May exhibition for 2020 in Paris, which was really interesting because we'd always been virtual, and all of a sudden we were going to have a brick and mortar exhibition of the best of Print Day in May. So it was very exciting. It was sort of an interesting circle that came around. And of course, we couldn't do it because of the pandemic. So what we did instead in last year in 2021 was we did a virtual exhibition called Traces that people applied to and were selected by 3 international judges. And it was really exciting. And we had the show go all last summer, and it was, prestigious and wonderful. And we promoted it heavily. And it's another aspect of Print Day in May. We're not doing it this year just because it turns out it was just so much work for a small team. I just didn't have the bandwidth for it. But it's something that we can always resurrect. We can look at brick and mortar gallery shows in the future. So the idea of this virtual platform, of this virtual event, being able to take on different kinds of identities each year and throughout the year it's a wonderful fluid model that I want to just put out there in the world because, somebody has a good idea for this and it doesn't cost money and or costs little, or they want to fundraise for it, or they want to get a grant for it and they want to use the mantle of Print Day in May, I am really open to that sort of thing. So I want to put that out in the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really wonderful. And part of what makes our community so great, I think, is that thread of enthusiasm that goes around the world and thread of needing to make those connections and reaching out and doing them. And so, yeah, I love that. So if someone has an idea or a venue or anything that, things like this event can be these living, breathing, evolving experiences in a way that before our digital sphere, you really were limited to, who's in my city.
Exactly.
And now it can be really, someone from a little town in India can, reach out to you after hearing this podcast with the most brilliant element to add something that you and I could have never thought of. I mean, it's the that like collective knowledge and collective passion can just really like raise everything that we do, can really elevate any undertaking as long as we're open for that. And that's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can, people can reach me at printdayinmay@gmail.com. And, 3 or 4 of us are looking at the Gmail every day as things ramp up and we get back to you. It's so funny because sometimes people write in and they're all angry because we didn't get back to them, in like seconds. And, well, what about this? And I thought you, and I'm like, okay, I understand. But we're not a corporation.
Yeah.
It's like literally like there's 5 of us this year, which is a big team. So we do the absolute best we can. And we really want, somebody's calling and they want me to change their password. And I'm like, okay, here, I will do that. I will get to that. But a lot of this has been, like we have this participants list on the website, which is really funny because it's got, thousands and thousands of participants broken down by country. And literally, I have hand entered every name.
Oh my gosh, Robynn.
That list this year. And I have people like who register and then the next day they're like, where's my name? And I'm like, I'm getting to it, I swear, but it's 3 days out from the event and you can't believe my inbox. But this year, because of Carrie, we are actually connecting to another way of doing this so that every time someone is registered, I then activate them because we just, we have to deal with spammers. But as soon as they're activated, they're going to be put on this list. And I cannot tell you what that does for me. It actually means I can probably print on Print Day in May.
Yeah, I bet.
I always try to do, but and actually on 2020, it was just me and my husband in my studio. And so I made a whole bunch of YouTube videos that day, which was pretty fun as I was printing. But yeah, we are not like we're not in a corporate building in an industrial park in Silicon Valley.
That is one of the fun things about, creating something that's accessible to the public is that you then get to deal with the public, which is its own learning curve, I think.
Is.
Yeah.
Well, it sure has made me a lot more sympathetic when I'm frustrated by something. I'm like, okay, well, it could just be my counterpart in her living room.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
I shouldn't say that. I should tell you that we've got, Print Day in May stations all over the world and that we're huge and
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the things that's so interesting about our modern world is that you can actually have that weird balance of like being huge but also small.
Yes.
In a way that this is a new experience for humans. Like I've said, we're a team of 4 people at the podcast, but we get like over 7,000 downloads a week on it. And
it's
then
amazing.
you times anyway, there's just a lot of people who listen and like reach out and kind of, often need or want attention or advice or something. And we can have a large reach at the same time that we can only be 4 people. And it's a really interesting balance. Luckily, for the most part, printmakers tend to be very well behaved, very understanding and kind people. And then there's the people who just have something going on in their own life that you get to brush up against.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'd love it if you could maybe speak to, in the time we have left, some of the highlights in the last 15 years. I love, love, love the penguin footprints in Antarctica as a print. That makes my heart grow 3 sizes bigger. But, kind of beyond that, I'm sure you've seen some really wonderful, creative, beautiful, unusual contributions to Print Day in May.
Yes, absolutely. We have. One of my favorite ones was a photograph that was sent to us it was a black and white photograph of about 20 kids in India holding a Print Day in May banner with their handprints all over it.
I love it.
I love that. That was really super special. Then I also just love getting people in different academic situations and also just in community print shops. They will make posters advertising full-on events for the whole month of May in honor of Print Day in May, or the week, or just the day itself. I love that. There was a group of people actually in Monterey, coming full circle 10 years later, or actually it was even longer because I think it was last year that they went down, and these were people I didn't know. So they had found out about it, even though it had started there. And they went down to the wharf and got fish and did that incredibly beautiful Japanese technique of fish. That was really beautiful too, especially since it was in Monterey and it didn't have anything to do with the college. And somehow they had just, heard about it again. So those are some really wonderful things. There are often times when adult printmakers in a print group will spend the day with kids. And that's always really lovely because then you're talking about continuing printmaking through generations.
Yeah.
And, we need that. So that's always great. I also loved during 2020 when a lot of people didn't have access to their presses. And, for all kinds of reasons. And people still printed. They carved pieces of rubber, or they carved little pieces of cork from wine bottles and made stamp prints. Or, a friend of mine was traveling one year and couldn't participate. So she sent a photograph of a margarita glass with her lipstick print on it. I was like, that's the spirit. So, and then hoof prints. A lot of my horse friends will participate by taking photographs of their horses' hoof prints.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing.
Well, and that's something that I like about it as well, is that it tends to lean into this idea of everything is printmaking. Exactly. And I love that attitude as well. And it is wonderful that, you can have people who are doing just mind-bendingly high-level explorations of color and form and layering and chemicals, sort of through something like lithography that you might see at Tamarind.
Yes.
And then you can have someone who just kind of understands at the heart of print. It's just that transfer. It's just that.
Exactly.
And so it can be lipstick or hoof prints, or hand prints, and that is beautiful. And one of the things at the heart of Hello Print Friend, which is part of the reason why it's called Hello Print Friend, is that inclusivity and this idea that the rising tide raises all boats. The spirit of community is good for humans individually and collectively, and that printmaking has a wonderful way of getting people to that connection. And the best way to do that is saying, yes, your 10-plate lithograph is a print, and yes, your penguin footprints is a print. You know?
Exactly. One of our favorite photographs is someone who inked up an ear of corn and rolled it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how brilliant is that? And at the same time, one of my missions, I'm hoping, every year I try to increase reach in a certain way. And this year I really want to reach out to academics who are so beleaguered by the pandemic. And I say to them, hey, make Print Day in May, make participation your final, your final project. Like, give yourselves a break, give your students a break, have fun, use Print Day in May to just let them enjoy being printmakers, to let you enjoy being printmakers, and to be proud of having gotten through another year like this.
Yeah. Yeah, yep. And maybe I can piggyback on that a bit because for the podcast, because I know people are already using the podcast in academic settings, but oh my gosh, instructors, just assign them to listen to one of these and do a write-up. Like, please, just take some of that off your plate. It is free. It is very easy to find, both Hello Print Friend and Print Day in May.
Yes, exactly.
Use the energy that already exists in the world, please.
Yep.
Because
agreed.
Goodness knows, instructors all over the world and all medium have really been shouldering a tremendous burden.
Believable.
And yeah, we see you and we love you. And if we can at all help, we are here.
Yes, let us know how we can help. I mean, I would be thrilled to do anything I can for students out there and obviously for their professors. So yes, let us help.
Yeah, wonderful. So I guess one of my last questions here is just one that I ask a fair amount of guests because it is one that I ponder quite a bit, but it is like, what is it about printmaking that makes these communities, so special? And, I hear people say things like, I never had friends until I came to a print studio.
Yes, I hear that too.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it's that when you pull something off of a plate onto another surface, piece of paper, piece of cloth, whatever it is, it's magic. And so I really think that it's shared magic. I think that it's people who have that moment at the same time. That is profound. And I think that, you can't help but encourage each other. You can't help but celebrate successes in that environment. And so I really think that's what it is. I think once you've shared that magic and you realize that with, even one other person with you, it's an exponential increase of energy and positivity and fun. That sets you off on a path of friendship. And, that's how I see it. That's how I always ran my program at school, was, look at the magic this person just created. And, someone would be about to pull a really complicated piece or even a really simple piece, even if it's just their first piece. And it would be like, all right, everybody, watch this. And then, instantly there'd be 30 people around the press with, cameras. And it would be like this collective, and, that just goes really far.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that answer that, we're all kind of sharing this magic. Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like a metaphor, like we're all these like alchemists, working together. Right.
Oh, we've created, gold out of straw.
Yeah, exactly. And that magic is what keeps bringing people back. And,
and also the idea that, and I always tell my students this, for every one of you standing here in the studio today, there is a different way of solving this problem. And so the idea that you can learn from others, that, you've got your way that you think you can solve the problem, and you can, but so can every single other person do it differently, which then when you bring that energy into your brain, it expands your brain and your heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And that transfer of knowledge that happens so, oh, sorry. My phone. Sorry, thought I had my phone on silent, but a call came in. Sorry about that. These things happen. Yeah. If 3 years of podcasting, you think I would have gotten that part down yet? But yeah, I was going to say, and that free transfer of knowledge.
Yes.
That is a bonding agent between two people.
Really is.
Yeah.
It is. And it's physical. Printmaking is physical. So helping each other do things is critical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really bonding thing too. You see someone out of the corner of your eye who is like struggling to get a plate across the room safely, and you run over and help. I mean, that's something people don't forget.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love also the conversations that can happen around the creative process, how you can just be in a studio and someone can be like, why don't I like this image?
Yes.
And you can be like, let's have a chat,
Yeah.
And I think that can be really great and really bonding as well. Just that exploration of why isn't this working for you and what's going on in that, because that can be a really personal conversation.
Yes.
And of course, we bond through vulnerability. This is how humans create long-standing friendships and social connections. Is the more vulnerable you are, the more people will think that they have a connection to you, and not just think, it will have a connection to you.
Yeah, you'll have a connection. And if somebody is in their kitchen and they're making a painting and they're, not an experienced painter and they're embarrassed to show it, and, they put it in a closet or whatever, no one ever sees it. If you're in a print studio starting out, you're exposed.
Yeah.
And that is a vulnerability. That takes courage to be in there with other people. And when the other thing about printmaking is that I, as an experienced printmaker, can learn unbelievable amounts from beginning printmakers. Like I can learn something from everyone. So I can use that in my practice. And then I can say, wow, that's a brilliant idea. I never thought of that. Or look at that mark you just made. How did you get that mark? Like that empowers people. And that's another thing that happens is through that shared knowledge is that people, you lose the hierarchy. Mm-hmm. And that's a really beautiful thing too.
Yeah. Both of those are really, really beautiful points. That idea of needing to be, or not being able to hide those early wobbly, bambly legs image making moments.
Yes.
And then also, the fact that printmaking is such a huge camp. It's so complex. There's so many different ways of doing things within every medium. And yet we constantly are learning and trading ideas. And that's brilliant and beautiful. And I think is a perfect note to end on, because
sounds good to me.
I think that's just wonderful, and I'm really excited that Print Day in May exists and that we're getting to share it with people, and I hope that people listen and want to participate and just continue our global community of printmakers, because it's one of my favorite things I have ever discovered on this planet. So
absolutely. Me too. I kind of lucked into it, and boy, was I just got hooked. I've never looked back.
Wonderful. Well, Robynn, it's been a delight to talk to you and hear your love and passion for printmaking and building community. And thank you for the work that you do. And let us know if we can help it all over here on Hello Print Friend, our little team of 4. We'll definitely
we should get our teams together sometime.
Yeah.
That would be really fun. We're not that far away from each other.
No.
We should be all printing together at some point.
We could do like a print, I don't know what you would call ourselves, like print amplifier retreat in Joshua Tree. We'll meet halfway.
Oh my God, I just was there for the first time last week. I'm with you.
Wonderful. I love it. So
great. Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure, and print on.
Yeah, beautiful. Print on. And we will be in touch and look forward to following Print Day in May this year.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Robynn. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
If you like today's episode, we have a Patreon where you can help us keep the lights on and get bonus content, like Shop Talk Shorts with our editor, Timothy Pauschak, who digs deep on materials, processes, and techniques with our guests. Also, if you listen this far, you might be that special kind of print friend who would leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us, it lightens our hearts, and we would love it if you did. Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Catherine Brimberry, founder of the iconic Flatbed Press of Austin. We talk about how a controversial mural in her hometown post office lit the spark of interest in art for her as a young girl, her road to starting Flatbed, and how she's kept the institution going for over 30 years. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.